Hey guys, how are you? I hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I have yet another movie review, so I hope you find this one interesting. This is a horror film from Ireland, English language, released in the year 2015, directed by Gordon Hardy, and this movie is called The Hallow. So The Hallow is based in mythology. Basically the idea is that there are creatures that live in the forest that are banshees and some other Irish mythological creatures, and if you encroach on their territory, then they're going to encroach on your territory in a very aggressive way. So in this instance, we've got a married couple and a young son. They come into this house in very rural land in the countryside of Ireland, and the father works basically he takes tests of trees, plants and wildlife. So he works in nature, and this forces him to go into the woods. Now, much to the displeasure of the locals, who believe that this myth is actually reality, and they think that by him going into the woods all the time, they're going to upset these creatures, and that the creatures are going to put everyone in danger. So one night, this married couple's window gets smashed. Initially they think that it's one of the locals that is trying to scare them, but it actually turns out to be a lot worse than that, and this is where they start to realise that maybe there is some truth in this mythology after all. So whether or not that is the case, it's something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now, my thoughts on The Hallow. I actually really enjoyed this film, and I can't say that I'm surprised, because after seeing the trailer I was hooked. Now, the only thing I had fear with was that the trailer was going to be a lot better than the actual movie. So I was very relieved to see that this movie was as good as the trailer promises. If you are a fan of fantasy-like horror films and films that are drenched in mythology, then this is definitely for you. I can compare this one to the likes of Guillermo del Toro in the fantasy feels that he has in his movies. If you like that kind of stuff, then you're really going to like The Hallow. I think the biggest plus in The Hallow is that it has a very interesting story, and it allows you to enjoy the film immensely. There are some very good horror set pieces, there is some very good cinematography, it's a very beautiful film to look at, and I love the idea of the fantasy world clashing with the reality. So these woods that this mythology takes place in, it feels like it's not just haunted woods, it actually feels like it's a completely different world. It actually feels like you're jumping into a very twisted, nightmarish fairy tale. And so that's the feeling that this director wanted, and that's the feeling that he really creates, and that's what I loved about it so much, and the fact that there is so much time and attention in the details of the horror set pieces. This is not a movie that relies on jump scares. This is a movie that really builds the tension to the point where when it actually happens you are stunned, because it's just very subtle in its approach. There are some moments in the film where these creatures are creeping up on them, and it's done in a really spooky way. Just the way the cameras are used, it shows a sign of a very promising horror filmmaker. And I just loved basically every minute of this film. Now, there are some generic moments. The characters surprisingly were not as generic as I was expecting. Basically, these are characters that are not making decisions for the progression of the film and for the convenience of the film. These are characters that are making realistic decisions and realistic reactions to what's being imposed upon them, and they're doing it in situations where the director isn't allowing them to be caught in having to make decisions for the progression of the film. The decisions they make are very realistic, they make sense, but the movie can still progress. So it's not over before you know it, because they've made a sensible decision. The director allows these characters to be put into a position where they make the right call, but they're still in a lot of danger. So that takes a lot of frustration out of the film, and that's ultimately another reason why you enjoy the movie as much as you do, because they aren't making these brain-dead moves. And so that does steer clear of the generic sort of way that a lot of horror films go about, and I think that the director really studied what he was going to do. He really knew how to pull everything off to a point where it had a certain level of realism. So because you're not calling these characters so stupid, you actually have fear for them, because they are very likeable. They don't have generic sort of annoying qualities about them. You actually feel that they love each other. You feel that they love their young son, and when they're put into all this peril, you actually hope they come out of it. So there is an added sense of suspense in that. I love the as I said, apart from loving the mythology, you've got the clashing of the reality versus the fantasy world, and when it feels like a battle of two different dimensions. You've got the overall message of how we treat nature and how nature could react. and I really like that aspect, but none of the aspects really take centre stage. It all combines to allow yourself to have as much fun as the director wants you to, and it just feels like it's not taking any cheap tricks, it's not having any jump scares. There are no scares that are easy to make. It's all down to the solid platform that the director creates, and from the first minute you're feeling very uneasy, and although nothing might be happening, you're still absorbed into it because they start going through the mythology, and the creatures in this mythological world are fantastic. Nothing is CGI, it is very practical, and they look really good. They actually feel like you're reading a fairy tale, and so as I said, it feels like there is no laziness. It feels like the director knows exactly what he's doing, he knows his limitations, and he's put it onto the screen to make one of the more memorable horror films out there in recent memory. So if you like movies like Pan's Labyrinth, where you've got reality and fantasy, if you like films like Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, if you like movies like The Descent or Dog Soldiers, where it's set in a very mysterious community and it's basically us versus nature, then this is definitely one I would highly recommend. The ending was a little bit generic, which is something that it didn't derail the experience because it stayed true to what it was, but you can kind of predict what's happening. But that was the only element to the film that I thought was predictable in what was a very impressive experience. So I'm definitely recommending this film to everyone out there who is a fan of the creature feature subgenre. This one will not disappoint. As a result of that, I am going to give it 3.5 stars. Alright guys, that's my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.